All right, so normally when I test your knowledge on the elements of art, people get shape and form confused. So I just want you to remember that shapes are flat. Shapes are flat. There's only two dimensions. They only have length and width. If I wanted to create a form, I would take multiple shapes and assemble them together to get a third dimension. So think about that. A shape is only one side of a form, and they have length and width, no height. Once you have the definition of a shape, now that my screen has stopped moving, go ahead and type the word shape in the chat. All right, I'm waiting for about 9 more people. 7, excuse me, 7 people. And again, I apologize for the weird screen vibes today. Not sure what's going on. Okay, so there are different types of shapes. Now, if I was asked to do a mathematical drawing on graph paper, most likely I'd be using a ruler to create points, right? I would have to plot these points based on the mathematical equation or whatever the problem is that I'm trying to solve. I remember back in my math class in college plotting points on the graph paper and having to figure out the length, width, and height of a form. And I would do that by creating a geometric shape using the graph paper and the mathematical proportions. Now, in art, we use geometric shapes, and they're defined by points, angles, and edges, often straight, not jagged lines. So go ahead and write down the definition of geometric shapes, and then put the number 2 in the chat. Geometric shapes are defined by points, angles, edges, and straight lines. I was talking to a contractor outside today who is building my studio, and he was saying that the parts that he was assembling didn't have proper measurements, so that they weren't fitting together. They weren't aligning. The angles and points weren't meeting up properly. So in geometry, we really need to have refined angles, edges, and points. Hence why geometric shapes are defined in that way. Go ahead and put the number 2 in the chat when you have the definition of geometric shapes. Okay, waiting for 9 more people. Let's take another 30 seconds to get the definition for geometric shapes. So normally I have you guys for a full year. This is the first time I've ever taught a single semester course and only done 3 basic projects. But if I did have you for a full year-long course, we would start using a tool called the beveling tool. I actually bought a full class set when I became a teacher at North County because I wanted to make this box project, and I realized we didn't have the proper resources to do it. So for that project, we needed 6 squares that were evenly measured. This is a slide showing all the geometric shapes within the category, and surprisingly, a circle is one of them. But if I want to make a cube, which is 3-dimensional, I would need 6 shapes that are the same length and width. And this artist was particularly intrigued by shapes. So much so that his artwork that he developed in the late 1800s became more so famous in the last 10 years. he created these simple rectangle shapes and used really basic primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, as well as high contrast colors, black against white, to make this really, really basic composition. And when I look at it, I definitely think shape, maybe line and color too. So this would be a great slide for your portfolio in those areas. Um, but fashion designers thought, hey, simple designs transfer really easy on clothing, apparel, and particularly shoes. So they were inspired by this artist's work and they made limited edition Vans and Converse. Now the sales were super high. Anytime a brand makes limited edition, other brands think, hey, we want to jump on that train. So Nike didn't want to be left out. They made a set of the high tops with that same design using those shapes, simple colors, and varied line qualities. In the ceramic world, we use geometric shapes to create jewelry, to create functional pieces. And we do that by using math to create even intervals and angles. Now, the opposite of geometric is organic. And in the organic shape world, there are rarely any angles and edges because organic shapes are defined as fluid, free-form shapes. So what you'll notice in these slides is that I actually have a ceramic image and an image from the natural world. Organic shapes are found in the natural world, such as plants, shells, water drops, clouds, and they're unique. Usually there's not one the same. I want you to write down just the first line that defines organic shapes. And then once you've got it, put the number 3 in the chat. So organic shapes are fluid and free form. They're often found in the natural world and they're really unique. So this little cactus ring holder is made up of 4 coils and a base. Really cute and easy project that showcases organic shapes. Once you've got organic shapes, put the number 3 in the chat. Okay, about half of you have it. You just need to write the first sentence, that's it. Okay, waiting for about 8 more people. Okay, let's take another 20 seconds to write down and confirm in the chat. All right, let's look at a few more examples. So in ceramics, we make a lot of detailed projects, and the way that we assemble them is using different types of methods. And in this particular image, we see a flower. You can make a flower out of ceramics by pinching out one petal at a time. Each petal would be considered an organic shape. And then when you assemble them as a collective whole, you get a form, right? Because one shape makes up only one part of a form. Plants, same thing, particularly with succulents. This one here that's encapsulated in the circle is ceramic. Same on the bottom middle left. And then the rest are found in the natural world. Water is considered organic, and when we paint or draw water, easier to paint. we can get that same kind of organic vibe. There's a guy, one of my favorite surfers, in a barrel. And this photograph, which is two-dimensional, if I run my hand across the photograph, it's flat, just has length and width, portraying organic shapes. These here are ceramic shells, also resembled after shells from the natural world. And each little part that's assembled is part of the form. So these tiny pieces that make up the collective whole are shapes. We have ceramic ornaments, flat shapes, little bit of height there, but more or less flat. I'm going to skip over that for today. So when we're looking for images to put into our portfolio, I'm going to give you guys some samples of what I'm looking for this category. So here in this big mural artwork, this was in Watsonville a while back. I don't know if they still have it there. We see a combination of different line qualities as well as organic and geometric shapes. The ceramic platters, we've got geometric rectangle and also a carved rectangle with some organic carving inside. This 2D composition done in India ink, where the left side's geometric and the right side's organic. This image done in colored pencil of a Nike shoe. The shoe itself and some of the components of the shoe are organic, and then the shapes that overlap are considered geometric with their refined angles and edges. Trompe l'oeil, creating the illusion of depth with chalk. Fools the eye. Graffiti artists, some of the least appreciated artists on the planet, in my opinion, because they're considered vandals. They use the elements of art and do such a good job portraying both organic and geometric shapes, making them look like forms. But when we run our hand across their graffiti, it's flat. It's only 2 dimensions. So let's look at shapes in a nutshell. This is the overview of shapes just to give you a better understanding. Let's take a look. I can play it this tiny.
Fruit has played a prominent role in the history of art. It's long been a favorite subject for artists, making still life paintings and drawings. Looking at still lifes of fruit is a useful way of studying how artists approach making shapes. Shape is one of the 7 elements of art, along with line, form, texture, value, space, and color. When the beginning of a line connects with its own end or intersects with another, a shape is formed. In visual art, shapes are flat and are defined by their length and width. In other words, they're 2-dimensional. There is an infinite number of shapes, but all fall into one of 2 categories: geometric or organic. Geometric shapes are commonly recognized such as squares, hexagons, rectangles, and circles. Organic shapes are free-form and often one of a kind. Artists learn how to see the world around them as basic shapes. Simplifying objects into geometric and organic shapes makes drawing them easier. Shapes inherit the qualities of the lines that were used to construct them. For instance, this painting by Cezanne has heavy, solid outlines that define the shapes, whereas the fruit in this ink drawing by Manoel Araki is made up of very soft, fuzzy lines. Each approach to making lines produces different feelings and associations in the viewers. Some artists make oranges that are perfectly round, while others draw or paint every little bump and detail of the skin. The next time you're looking at a painting or drawing, try to notice how the artist is using shape in their work. If you were making a drawing or painting, How would you interpret the objects in front of you? Would you draw them as faithfully as possible? Or would you choose to represent them more abstractly? Practice for yourself by setting up a bowl of fruit and drawing what you see.
All right, shape, one of the 7 elements of art. We have one more, just a few more slides before we get some work time. So now we're going to look at forms. So as I indicated, when we're looking at this cube, I see visually right in front of me 3 different shapes, okay? 3 different squares. But I know that there are 3 more. There are 6 total. 6 total squares, 6 total shapes that make up that form. Because one side of a form is considered a shape because it's flat. Now, forms have 3 dimensions. Let's look at some forms. So the definition of a form is a 3-dimensional object that has not only length and width, but also has height. I want you to go ahead and write down the definition of a form and put the word form in the chat once you've got it. We're almost into our work time, so keep up the strong pace. You guys can do it. Once you've got the definition of a form, go ahead and type the word form into the chat. Natalie, being that you've already written down the term, can you let me know? Can you see the whole screen on your view of the lecture, or is it super enlarged or small? What do you see on your side when I'm showing it like this?
I can see the whole screen and it's a perfect size.
Oh, good. Okay, that's good news. Thank you. Okay, I've seen 14 of you type in the chat. That means there are 13 of you more that need to confirm. After you get the definition down, go ahead and type the word form into the chat. Now, my area of focus for getting my degree in the visual arts was ceramics. I emphasized ceramics in my master's program and also my credential program, but I had to take a ton of drawing and painting classes, and I've also taught that at North County. And what I thought was the most challenging as I was learning this skill was how to draw and paint forms. I found if I could sculpt it out of clay, easy. But when it came to making things look realistic on paper or canvas, it was super tricky for me to get the shadow and light correct. So when we're going from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, we have to use light and shadow to create the illusion of depth. And there's this technique when I studied abroad in Paris called trompe-l'oeil, tricking the eye. So when we look at an artwork, we think it's actually 3 dimensions, but it's really only 2 because when we run our hand across the painting, it's in fact flat. So artists love playing with the illusion of depth. So just one more slide to show you that we take shapes and we assemble them together to get that 3rd dimension, that dimension of height. But like I said, when we're drawing them, we have to add value. And I'm talking about a value scale from light to dark, the lightest light and the blackest black, and all the grays in between, to really convey that light source, to convey the illusion of depth. So when we're looking at forms, we could have actual forms like the crystal wands that you see here that have refined angles and edges to represent a geometric form. Think about diamonds. The way that a diamond is cut is to perfection. It's using specific dimensions, length, width, and height, to create that form. Now, in the ceramic world, I have students create lanterns in ceramics too. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do this, but just want to show you some visuals of the different types of artworks that we create that are taking up actual space. They are realistic forms, tangible forms that we can touch, versus a drawing that is creating that illusion of depth. So we've got some variety here. These are some boxes that my students made over the last few years in ceramics. And I'll tell you what, when the student didn't measure the geometric shape and they had 6 different flat pieces of clay to put together to make that form, we would know that the dimensions were off and that they wouldn't line up properly if the measurements weren't concrete. Same thing with the lanterns that we created. This student did an excellent job. I'm just being nitpicky, but the triangle on the right side versus the triangle on the left side at the top of the lantern is a little bit off in the measurement. So that's why geometry is so important in measuring and plotting points with both forms and shapes. Geometric teapot made of clay. Okay, so this is by far my favorite video on the elements of art. They're all made by KQED and they do a really good job with it. But this is where I think I get the most interest out of art, is when people really play with that technique called trompe-l'oeil. And you might even look that up on Google Arts and Culture. I can guarantee it's an artistic movement and category. But graffiti artists do a really good job of this. And you see a lot of different forms being implied in cities. When you go to the city, not only graffiti artists, but mural artists and sculptors and different things like that. So let's take a look at forms, and then we're going to have some work time to really put our ideas into practice. I can get this little guy to play. Need to make it. There we go. Oop. I think I got to adjust my size here. Give me a minute. There we go.
These paintings are all examples of the genre of art called trompe-l'oeil. Translated from French, trompe-l'oeil literally means fools the eye. It's a style of art that makes you question if what you're seeing is real. It's this illusion of depth that artists create, which tricks our eyes. When shapes get this third dimension of depth, they become forms. Form is one of the 7 elements of art, along with line, shape, texture, value, space, and color. When given form, circles become spheres, squares become cubes, triangles become cones or pyramids. Form takes up space in either a real or implied way. In paintings and drawings, for instance, form is implied because it's an illusion of 3 dimensions. With sculpture, on the other hand, form is real because it takes up 3-dimensional space. Visual artists use light and shadow effects to create the illusion of 3-dimensional form. A strong sense of form can also be created by increasing contrast between highlights and shadow areas. Street artist Banksy uses this technique a lot. Notice how these human forms are made up of only white, black, and 1 shade of gray. Sometimes form can even be created by an artist's use of color. Artist Akash Nihalani often juxtaposes brightly colored forms against neutral backgrounds to create the illusion of depth.
The guy's laying on the ground.
Notice his forms don't incorporate any shading at all. These are just a few ways artists create forms and incorporate depth into their work. What are some other ways that artists create form? Is there a particular style or technique that draws you in and catches your eye? Mastering many different approaches to making form will give you unlimited options when creating your own artwork and will enable you to fool viewers' eyes in any way you choose.
Okay, so it is 2:20, which gives us exactly a half an hour. I'm going to give you a list of things that I want you to do in order of business. I'm going to scroll through here and get to my list. It's my list here. There we are. So I want you to finish any late work first. I want to have you finish your pinch pot if you haven't, and reach out to me if you still need to make an appointment. Upload the images of your pinch pot if you still need to do that, and or your lecture notes, and complete quiz 2. If you're all set on those above items, I want you to work on your slideshow and use Google Arts and Culture as a resource. Open up both tabs side by side so that you have those right in front of you and you can go back and forth. You can even have this lecture open so that you can refer back to the notes in case you missed anything yesterday that you want to revisit. So I'd like you to go to the classwork tab and click on whatever it is you're working on. And from this list, I want you to tell me in the chat right now, what is it that you're going to work on for the next half hour? Are you working on late work or are you working on the slides?